start. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Woodburn Accountants and Advisors webinar series. This week is all about setting up a company in China. We've got a host of different speakers that are going to be joining us this week, from lawyers to professionals, talking all about the phase surrounding setting up a company in China. Today, I am going to be talking about 9 key considerations for setting up a company in China. I realized as I was doing the presentation that I made a mistake in the introduction or the blurb to today's session, where I wrote 12 key considerations. Actually, it's 4 milestones and 9 key considerations, so that's what tripped me up. But today we will be talking about the most important considerations that you need to make as decision makers for the establishment of your company and the future running of your company in China. Before we start today's session, I love interacting with everybody, and my main aim is that you interact with me. So we are going to start off the webinar with you telling me a little bit about who you are. So I advertised this webinar to the China-Britain Business Council. There are a lot of new faces and names on this webinar, so it'd be great if you could tell me a little bit about your background so I know at what stage of development you are actually at. So if you are a newbie to China, that basically means you found an opportunity for your business in China. You're looking to gain a certain level of education on how to set up a company and whether that makes sense for you. If you are a newbie, type that into the chat box, newbie. If you are a startup in China, it means that you have transacted with the Chinese market for a certain period of time. I usually say always about 2 to 3 years. And you're now evaluating your key trigger points to see whether it makes sense for you to actually establish an entity, okay? So the newbies pretty much not done anything. They're not sure if they need a company or not to do what they're looking to do. Startups, you've transacted already with China and you're looking at your key trigger points to see whether it makes sense for you to actually establish your company. And obviously the experienced China hands, in my eyes, will be those of you that already have entities in China. So please go to the chat box and tell me, are you a newbie? Are you an experienced? Are you a startup? Daryl's a newbie, Charles newbie, Andrew newbie, Leanne newbie, Chuka, I hope I said that right, newbie. David is experienced, Peter's experienced. Oh, so we've really got the ends of the spectrum there. Got it. Neil is experienced as well. Jonathan's experienced. So it's a real mixture here of newbies and experienced. Keep going. Julie is on to, actually she's an experienced but looking to set up a different business model. Great. Andrew's experienced. All right. I would almost say, why are you guys on here? Well, hopefully I'm going to educate you on something today. Thank you all for typing in. Let's move on. How the webinar works. So as you know, we're using Zoom. I used to use GoToWebinar. I've relocated to Zoom for pricing reasons. Didn't realize how much cheaper it was. I'm still experimenting it using Zoom Webinar, using Zoom Meeting to get an understanding of what works best. Here are the tips about the webinar. I am on a minimum bandwidth, so please bear with me. If anything happens on my side, technically, it does take about 60 seconds to 1 minute for me to reboot and to log back on the system. I will be coming back on to finish today's presentation, and I am recording today's session, so everyone will get a copy of the recording once we are done. If things happen on your side for similar reasons, my suggestion to you would be to log off and try to log back in. If you are logging off, logging back in 2-3 times, I would say don't frustrate yourselves. Log off, wait for the recording. You'll have that at your fingertips, all right? The best part about these webinar series are the Q&A. Please don't be shy, ask away. Use the chat box, ask any questions, I will answer. That's my promise to you. I will answer every single question and comment that comes in. Please remember, in China, there is no dumb question. Every question has a validity depending on what stage you are in your journey. So please don't be shy, ask away, okay? I will be staying on until every session, question or comment has been answered, which is usually why it does take about 90 minutes to finish sessions, is because usually I leave about 30 minutes for the Q&A. All right. So that's the technical side. I'm here to educate you. I'm here to teach you. There's going to be a lot of content. Again, we're looking at 9 key considerations for setting up a company. That is a lot of content. So take a pen and paper, write notes, or use the chat box to write questions if you want things answered. A little bit about myself. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Christina Kohler-Coluccia. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. I have been in the corporate services sector for 17 years, and my focus has been for 17 years on the Chinese market. We are a family-owned business. My brother heads up our Hong Kong company. He's based out of Hong Kong. I head up our Shanghai operation, and in normal times, I would be based in Shanghai. I am currently confined in Europe due to border controls, but hopefully that will end very soon as vaccines are being issued, and China has just recently opened up their borders to those that have taken the Chinese vaccine. So hopefully I'll be able to get back home soon. What I do is my focus is 100% placed on foreign investors who are looking to enter the Chinese market. 100% of my clients are foreign invested companies or joint ventures with a foreign invested component. I have helped more than 500 companies with their market strategy, all the pre-investment advisory, as well as then the actual implementation into the Chinese market, whether that is through contracts from the head office or whether that is actually establishing an entity physically in China. My main focus now is growth, helping my companies to understand how to grow in the Chinese market, what they need to consider to grow, and what they can do by simply analyzing financial management reports and other areas of their business to understand where there might be leakages or seepages within their business structure. I'm a creator of the China Roadmap methodology, as well as the China Profit Accelerator, which are workshops that I perform on a rotating basis every month, basically. And if you're interested in those types of events, go to our website, woodburnglobal.com/events, and you can find out our whole array of webinars that are up and coming, all complimentary. And we are set up basically all the way until the end of April. So definitely look on our website for all the events that are coming up. This month is about setting up a company in China. Next month, I will be speaking and having guest speakers talk about how to analyze your China business. So don't miss out on that. All right, so today we're going to start off with today's presentation, which is setting up a company in China. And I wanted to start off with, what are the problems for foreign investors, right? This is what I'm seeing. And this is either coming from friends of mine that are looking to set up in China, or just acquaintances that I've met briefly, or existing clients that are talking to me about, you know, the misunderstandings that they're having regarding the Chinese market. So first of all, what are the problems? Well, the problems are, one, they're unfamiliar with the incorporation process. Two, they don't understand the timeline because they just can't believe it takes as long as it takes. And trust me, when I first arrived in China in 2003, 2004, it took twice as long. They're confused by the document list, and sometimes they are weary of the document list, and others are not at all. They just sign whatever's in front of them. Others are astounded by the amount of documents and sometimes have a fear of, you know, do I have the right things in front of me? There's no transparency, guidance, advisory given about the key considerations made, which just basically means that you have no strategy in place. You do things in such a rush that you will find in the long term, you have to update and change things as you are operating your company, which distracts you from the core function where you should be focusing on, which is the growth of your organization. And there is no time and thought process being taken into those key considerations, okay? I'm here to tell you, You need to spend time. You need to understand what these key considerations are so that you can bring your business forward, okay? They are critical. Spend time now, then you spend less money on changing things later on, and you have more time to focus on the actual core functions of your business. So let me give you transparency. That's my aim today. All right. First of all, I'm going to give you the process and the timeline. Now, what I give you will be what I deal with, what my advice is with whomever you are collaborating with to help you to set up your company in China. Get this from them. Okay, that's what I want to highlight today to you. Get this information from them in the format that I am now going to give it to you in. Okay, so the first is, what does the process look like? This is a step-by-step application process, highlighting the minimum working days required, and there are a couple of remarks around that, okay? So this is part one of the establishment process, and it only takes about 2 weeks if you have everything in order ahead of time, okay? So you need to, well, in our situation, how we do it is we have a Excel questionnaire which has all of the details regarding the 9 key considerations, which I need, which any lawyer will need, which any corporate service provider will need in order to establish your company, okay? We do it in a questionnaire format on Excel that you can just fill in very nicely and neatly. We take that, we will probably amend, come back to you and say, are you sure about certain aspects? Give certain advisory around it. And once we have that, we can do the name approval and we can do the online declaration. Now here it's a little bit of a vicious circle because in order to start step number 2, which is the name approval, you need to have a registered office address in place, which means you signed a lease agreement. Okay, so the question is then, who do you sign that lease agreement with? We don't have an entity in China. How does all of this work? Which is very true. You sign the lease with your head office, you then change that lease around once your company's established. It's very bureaucratic. A lot of it does not make sense, but this is how it works, okay? You then go do an online declaration, which is the Ministry of Commerce has online platforms now where you submit it. We did an application last year. Well, no, let me start off with, in most of the big cities, Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, the online declaration is very simple. The system actually works 95% of the time. Meaning that once you start uploading documents and inputting information, there's no error message that pops up. The system is functioning pretty well on the browsers that we're using. However, in places like Changshu, where we established a factory last year for a client of ours, they don't use the online system at all. It took us 2 weeks to figure out that they were not using the online system at all. And what they wanted was us to go in person to physically submit the documents. And actually what ended up happening was we ended up going face-to-face there and doing the online declaration with the officer at the Ministry of Commerce. Every city is going to have their own thing. In the tier 1 cities, it's pretty up to date with this online declaration. If you're going out into the tier 2, tier 3 cities, it is a matter of understanding how it's working there, whether they're still taking the old-fashioned route or they're upgraded themselves to doing the actual online declaration. Then your business license is issued. You go get your company chops, that's step 5, your seals, which are incredibly valuable in China. And then you go on to step 6, which is the CA application, which is where you get your key token. That all takes about 2 weeks, guys. Can be very, very quick if you are responding to your provider on a very timely basis, because there will be some back and forth with the Ministry of Commerce related to your business scope, could be also related to your name. I've had situations where we've had to come up with 100 different company names in order to get one of those approved. In cities like in Shanghai, where there are hundreds of thousands of companies being established, it's sometimes very tricky to find a name that's available. So every step, the working days is a guideline, okay? That's when it's the smoothest. Have I ever had it be this smooth? Never. But this is the guideline that the government gives you. And generally speaking, I would say for me, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks, an additional week to get things sorted out and to get to that stage, all right? Then you've got the post-registration. Let me just switch to the next slide. So if you are in an industry or sector where you need to apply for an additional license, so for example, you're in food and beverage, I've used that as an example here, you would have to then apply for the food business license. And that in itself can take 30 working days. So depending on the industry and sector you're in, it could potentially mean that you need to apply for an additional license. Could be an ICP license if you're doing e-commerce, food business license if you're looking to import food and beverage items. If you're in the chemical sector, you will also need to get an additional license. So it will really come down to what you're planning on doing. If you're in the medical device sector, and there are different stages of medical device items, class 1, you don't need an additional license. If you're medical device class 2 and 3, you do. So that happens at that stage as well. Once you've got that, or actually almost simultaneously, you can also do your bank account opening. Bank account openings are not so straightforward at the moment. It really depends on the city where you are establishing your company. In places like Shanghai, you will not have to travel to open up your bank account. There are solutions around that. In places like Shenzhen, every single bank requires still to meet the legal representative face-to-face to open the account, which means that if you're looking to establish in Shenzhen, we will have to find a loophole in order to be able to get your accounts open. Then comes the tax registration, the commercial company registration. And if you are then, doing import and export, you'll have to do the customs registration, foreign exchange registration for import-export business, and the customs e-port registration. All right. So again, all about 12 weeks. What I haven't added here for those of you that might potentially want to establish production facilities is the environmental license, which has to be added in there as well, which also takes about 30 working days to obtain. Okay. So whomever you're planning, my assumption is everybody that's on here today is looking to establish a company in China, upgrade their company, whatever it might be. Whomever you're working with, ask them for this timeline. Highlight it. I want a step-by-step procedure of how the actual application works, because it gives you tremendous transparency. And please don't be upset. The working day guideline is a guideline. Nothing in China is fixed by the number of days. Okay, so you've got to be aware of this as well. Document list. Now I'm going to give you guys this up front. You should be asking for a document list in this format or a similar format, bullet point, so that you have an understanding of how many there are. This is page 1. All right. Now, the reason why in mine it's so long is because I am adamant, and I say that firmly, I am adamant about my clients signing English versions or having English versions at their fingertips. Okay. I have had clients who were willing to sign documents that were simply in Chinese, trusting me. Now that's wonderful. I'm so relieved to have people's trust. It is idiotic from your side if you are trusting someone to that level and that degree and signing something you cannot read. Okay, I get very upset about this. All right. Now, English, you can also say you can have it in a German version or in a French version, whatever you want, but I put in here the basic of having at least a Chinese and an English version. Please promise me, you will not sign anything that you cannot read. If you can read Chinese, by all means, only sign the Chinese versions. But be respectful of also your team members who may not be able to read English versions. It is not that you are going to potentially stay unless you're the owner, stay in the company forever. So be respectful of the team members that are responsible for the China business and have things bilingually, okay? So many mistakes are happened because you put blind faith into your provider and just sign Chinese versions and you don't even know what is in there. Guys, this is the basics of China, of doing business in China. Sign what you can read, please. Okay, I can't emphasize that more. I don't want to go, I could do a whole presentation purely on these documents, but I highlighted in red documents that I think are key that have to come from your side, which is the authorization for legal documents. Now, currently with COVID, there are a lot of Chinese embassies and consulates that are not issuing these letter of authorization documents. We are in a stage right now of changing a shareholdership for a company in China, and we have been in Shanghai, actually, to be specific. Oh, no, sorry, in Wuxi. And we have been given the approval from the government to just issue a letter of confirmation to state that the Chinese embassy or consulate is not issuing these authorization letters because of the COVID virus. And as a consequence, the company is confirming that all of the business licenses and information in the House of Registry, which is in the UK, is authentic, okay? It's not an ideal situation because the Chinese government developed this whole concept of authorizing your shareholder documents because people were faking those types of documents. But because of COVID, because embassies are shut, consulates are shut, Chinese consulates are shut, and you can't get these documents, you know, the government realizes that they don't want you to stop the business flow coming in. And so you just ask the local government, what is the requirement? You get a template associated with that, like we've done, and it's worked, all right? So I did want to highlight that. Another key document that I want everyone to be aware of that follows you in the journey of your company is the Articles of Association. So if you look at point 3.4, the Articles of Association are your company bylaws. So it is highlighting everything that is basically the rules and regulations for your company. There are templates provided by the government that are not extensive. You can make these Articles of Association as extensive as you would like them to be. I don't know if some of you are aware of that. So don't always abide by the templates. Try to be smart, talk to your provider and see how you can expand on that. Our template version of the Articles of Association is an expanded version that, yes, in some cities, the government will come back and say, oh, you know, we don't have this clause in this city. Could you remove it? Then it's just a negotiation point, whether you agree, etc., on how it should be done. What we like to do with the Articles of Association is that it's one document in Chinese and English. So every clause has the Chinese and English version, so that you're not working with two documents, but you're working with one document that is submitted. The English, so some of you might all think this is now strange. The English version actually is not submitted. It is there for your benefit to know what you are signing, what you are reading, and confirming that, okay? So some of you might say, well, the English version, what's the point if it's not even submitted to the government? Fair enough. But I mean, I'm really sorry to say this. It is idiotic if you don't read Chinese to sign something that you don't understand. So at least have the English version there available, okay? Some of these documents, the Chinese government only wants the Chinese version. Like the Articles of Association, they are okay with having it bilingual, Chinese and English together. And there are a few others where they will allow that as well. Okay. Now, in point 22 is the ownership structure chart. This is for the bank account opening process. The bank does want to see who the beneficial owner is within the organization. And I believe they want to see anybody who is owning 10% or more of the shares of the shareholding company. Okay, and they basically want to see it from the final flow. Then we need passport copies and we need all the documents around the lease as well, okay? So yeah, that's the document list. Again, approach your providers to make sure that you have that list readily available and you can see it in full version, okay? This process is old-fashioned. Just be aware of that. Yes, there is the online declaration, which is done online. But once the online declaration is approved, you have to submit everything in original. So it does mean you are printing out a stack of A4 paper. It does mean that you will probably have 2 to 3 Chinese versions and 1 English version only. So it's a whole stack of papers then. And you can only sign with a black ink pen. Ballpoint pens, something like this, which I just happen to have here on my desk. I don't know if you guys can see it in the camera. A ballpoint pen is not acceptable. It has to be a black ink pen, which I have right here, has ink in it. They see that as something that's professional, must be in black color. If not, they won't accept the original documentation. Okay. That's just how strict they are. Did you know that there are key considerations needed to be made for the incorporation? I have spoken to companies that have appointed lawyers who have not discussed these considerations at all. In fact, have avoided them completely, to the point where when I broach the subject, the client has no clue around them at all. So I want to broach them today because my belief is these considerations should be made by you. They should not be made by a lawyer. They should not be made by a corporate service provider. They should not be made by an incorporation agent. They should be made by you. The person who is looking to invest in China and is putting money into that entity. I'm certainly not putting money into your entity. So these considerations cannot be made by me. I can only advise you around them. All right. There are 9 key considerations that have to be made. So I got mixed up with 12 because, as you can see, there are 12 boxes here. But the step-by-step follows the step-by-step process in the application process. And the 9 considerations are on the side with the arrows. Okay. So we're going to look at the type of entity, business scope, investment capital, term of validity, who's going to be the shareholder, who's going to be in the corporate management, what is the company name going to be, where's the registered office address going to be, I don't have any other item on that side, bank, who are you going to bank with, value-added tax status, and finance manager. You might think for the last 2, why do I need that in the incorporation? Well, things happen now very, very fast once your company is up and running. Those decisions should be made upfront, so you don't have to focus on that consideration later on. And we're going to be going through all of these 9 points today. So the first one is the structure of the company, okay? I've listed these 2 items under decision 1 because they go hand in hand, the type of the entity and the business scope. There are plenty of different types of entities that can be established. As highlighted by this slide, I'm giggling a little bit because these are just terms. I wish I would know how to use a highlighter on this, but I don't actually. So I'm not even going to try in case I make a mistake. But what I want to say here is a representative office is a liaison office that does nothing except hire people. All the other entities underneath representative office, the WFI, FICE, DOE, JV, FIP, they are all limited liability companies. Okay, we can talk about WFI and FICE and all of that. That just relates to shareholdership. You are establishing an LLC, a limited liability company, limited up to the registered capital that you're investing. All right. These beautiful terms, you can Google them and find information about them and whatnot. It's just referring to the shareholdership and the business scope. Has nothing to do with the actual structure of the entity you're establishing, which is a limited liability company. All right. So, when I get into discussions with people and someone says, yeah, I'm setting up a WFI. No, you're setting up a limited liability company. Yeah, but it's a WFI. I don't know. Who's the shareholder? Well, me. Who are you? Well, I'm a company based out of the UK, out of the US. Okay. And what's your business scope? Oh, I'm going to trade. Well, then you're actually a FICE. If you want to be really specific about the terminology, it gets so confusing if you use these terms, guys. What I want to highlight here is you're setting up a limited liability company, and now we have to distinguish what your business scope is going to be, because that will dictate a lot. And then who the shareholdership is, which is the next step, okay, which is step 2. So these are the types of entities that exist. Let me move on to the next slide. When you are thinking about the types of entities, which is basically deciding representative office, limited liability company, or whether you want to have a Chinese joint venture partner or not, you have to think about 3 things: the liability of that company, the flexibility that that company is going to offer to you, and the marketability of that company as well. Representative offices, in my belief, are useless entities. Sorry to be so harsh. There has to be a real reason why you would go the route of a rep office. I've only set up a couple in the last 3-4 years, almost 5 years, that were purely doing marketing in China. And they were actually real estate focused entities, i.e. selling real estate abroad to Chinese people. And the office in China was only doing marketing. There was going to be no revenue generation whatsoever, no foreseen vision of generating any revenue in China whatsoever, because the purchase of the property would be abroad. That's the only reason I would say go ahead with a rep office, okay? Because you have no vision, short or long term, to establish an entity, okay? So analyze the liability, the flexibility, and the marketability around the type of entity you're choosing, which would be either a rep office or an LLC, okay? Then moving on to the next slide. Choose your business activity wisely. I can't emphasize that more. This is a homework piece, actually, for those of you that are looking to establish your companies. The business scope of the Chinese company lists the services and potentially products that you are going to be performing under the company that you are registering, okay? You need to understand whether you are in the prohibited sector or whether you are in the restricted sector. That means looking at the negative list. You need to understand what you're going to be doing in that company, okay? Because the business scope ultimately dictates the type of entity that will be chosen, all right? If you are planning on trading, then a rep office is not an option. If you are trading, you'll have a limited liability company, and ultimately, obviously, you as a foreign investor will own a certain amount of shares. If you're going to bring in a Chinese partner, then it'll be a joint venture structure. If you are two foreign investors, it's still a joint venture structure. You need a shareholders agreement. Okay, so are you one investor owning 100% of the shares? Are you more than one investor holding partial amount of shares? You'll need a shareholders agreement. Okay, so you've got to analyze that ultimately and understand what you're going to be doing in the short and in the long term. This is a very, very rough description of what business scopes look like. They don't always look like this, depends on the cities that you're establishing in, all right? If we use Woodburn as an example, I think it's always easier if I give you guys an example. If we use Woodburn as an example, we are a service provider, corporate services firm, offering a variety of different corporate services. So we would use business scope number 4 down there. Investment consulting is in mine. Enterprise management consulting is in mine. Trade information consulting is in mine. I also have bookkeeping, incorporation agent. What else do I have? Market research, something to do with market research. Sorry, I don't remember it verbatim. But you know, I have made basically a list of what I'm looking to perform in the Chinese market. And as a result, I have taken that list. And when we did the online application, and this is a key thing that all of you need to remember, when you're doing the online declaration, it's a system developed by the Ministry of Commerce. And when you go to the section, which is called business scope, it's a pull down menu with thousands of choices. So as your service provider, I actually need you to do the homework for me to make me a bullet point list of what you are looking to do in the Chinese market and at what stage, okay? Then we go through this list, this pull down menu list, and we choose. And the issue is in places like in Shanghai, there is a determinate amount of items you can have. You cannot choose, for example, all 1,000. You might have an option of only choosing 10 or 15 or 20 items. So, you know, we have to narrow it down at some point as well, okay? So there is going to be that discussion back and forth as we go through it. Again, I've only put one slide on here regarding representative offices because I did see a question in the registration form about somebody who's looking to upgrade from a rep office to a limited company. So I thought I would just bring it out here a little bit. So representative offices are liaison offices tied to the parent company that can only provide market research, Liaison activities, basically zero contract signing can happen in that office. Zero negotiation on those contracts can happen in those offices. And I say this from the point of view of reading the laws black and white. Do people follow the laws black and white? No, they don't. But you've got to be very careful if you are going over that, because if at any point you are denounced, then you are going to run into difficulties. Rep offices are not generating revenue, whereas limited liability companies are. Okay, their purpose is to generate revenue and operate as a business in China. Rep offices are basically only paying off expenses, local expenses. Okay, so there may be some companies out there, and I believe there's one person who registered for today's event who raised that question, where they currently have a representative office and they're looking to upgrade that into a limited liability company. That process is absolutely not straightforward. And if that person is on here today right now, can you type that question you had? I'd be happy to answer it during the Q&A, because I don't want to miss out on missing certain information in the presentation. But do type it in, and I will touch on it during the Q&A. Action plan for your business scope, which will then help you to identify what type of entity you need, is take a paper and write all the activities and products and services that you are going to be performing today, in 5 years, because my assumption is you've made a projection, and ultimately in 10 years. What do you envisage doing? So if today you are simply doing trade, in 5 years, you believe you're going to be doing e-commerce, retail, and trade, and in 10 years, you're actually going to produce in China, write that all down. So you have an understanding of the exact activities you're going to be doing, and go into detail, okay? Are you going to be providing quality control services? Are you going to be offering technical support? Are you going to be selling spare parts? Are you going to be importing spare parts? Are you going to be keeping stock in China in your own warehouse? Are you going to be offering services? What type of services are those going to be? Okay. To aid a lot of people in doing this activity, we offer the service of doing benchmarking of your competitors. So my suggestion is, again, if you've already signed with a lawyer or with a corporate services provider, ask them to do this benchmarking for you. That means getting 2 to 3, because we all know we've got competitors already in the Chinese market. Choose 2 or 3 of your competitors and try to analyze how they are established through the content that is in their business license. And you can get that information publicly from the Ministry of Commerce, okay? And it's fascinating to see how some people have written their business scopes. We just did this exercise 2 weeks ago, and it was very enlightening to see how 3 competitors have their business scopes completely different one to another, okay? And that can reflect on the time that they had established, meaning they've never updated their business scope, to some company that's more recent, and so it's more maybe broadly worded. It can really vary, but it brings a lot of insight into how you might want to formulate your own business scope for the Chinese market. So really think about doing that type of benchmarking. If you are already established in China, because I think there's quite a few experienced China hens, this might be an interesting exercise for you to do. If you already have competitors in the market, you're already established in the market, do you want to improve on your business scope? Do you want to upgrade it, add things inside it, expand on it, right? You can do that by researching your competitors to see what they've done, if they've done anything at all. The next is trying to make your scope as broad as possible, which is why I say start off with being as detailed as possible so that we can group things together, okay? And remember that the final decision-making happens at the Ministry of Commerce, okay? So first is the online declaration, where you only have the option of choosing, like picking and choosing. If you're not happy with that and you feel like it does not expand properly on what you're looking to do, then we need to have a discussion with the Ministry of Commerce to see how we can create your final business scope. And there will be a back and forth discussion on that, okay? You will also need to understand if you need additional licensing. So if you are looking to set up your own website, then you need an ICP license. If you are looking to lease out a retail space, you will need to update your business scope to say retail. Okay, so if you're already existing in China, make sure that looking at your business scope every so often is something that you put on your to-do list. Decision number 2 is around capital investment and term of validity. And capital investment is something that scares a lot of people. And so I just want to, again, provide you with that level of transparency. So under the new foreign investment law, and hopefully my partners will analyze that, I believe, on Wednesday. In the new foreign investment law, you do not have to actually indicate your total investment amount. But in practicality, when you are establishing companies, you still have to add that amount in, okay? So that just highlights one thing where you've got the law, and then you've got the practicality now of establishing a company, all right? So that's why I've still kept that inside this slide. In the companies that we are establishing, Shanghai and in other regions, we still have to put that amount in. You've got the registered capital amount, which is the money that is going to flow into your capital account in China, which you will use as working capital to pay off your initial expenses during your startup phase. There's no minimum. You need to calculate how much you need before you start generating revenue. And even when you generate revenue, how much revenue will you need to be able to cover all of your expenses? Okay. Money does not flow easily to and from China. All right. So do not have the assumption that you indicate an amount on your registered capital, and then tomorrow, if you've run out, you can remit. No, no, no. You have to go through an application procedure to be able to be allowed to increase it. And then once that application is approved, you can remit. And that takes between 4 to 6 weeks now to get the approval. Okay. So timing is essential when you're running your business in China. And again, these are certain things that I would prefer my clients didn't focus on, like running out of money, which happens more often than I would like, because they didn't make the right calculation from the beginning. A lot of companies say, I want to give the minimum. So, you know, I'm like, well, there's no minimum. Well, then I just want to put 10,000 renminbi. And here I am sitting and saying, well, is 10,000 renminbi going to cover your expenses? Well, first of all, how much is your rent? Because that's the first thing that you have to sign. Oh, well, my rent is 50,000 renminbi. Well, then you can't have a registered capital amount of 10,000, right? So you've got to, it's all got to make sense, guys. Okay. And obviously the downside to the registered capital is the fact that it is your liability. You are liable up to that amount. Okay. The total investment is a ratio number against the registered capital. If you are investing less than 500,000 USD, the ratio is 7 to 10. 70% of the total investment will be registered capital. Okay. That's the ratio you should be abiding by. I kind of touched on all of this already, but basically what I just want to say is more often than not, companies have insufficient funds in their startup phase because they did not calculate the registered capital appropriately. There are many ways that we can help you to get capital into the country. It does not have to be via registered capital, okay? But again, you need to know that upfront because you have to have a strategy in place on how you're going to fund that company. You need to have that type of advisory. So whomever you're working with, have that one-to-one discussion about how you're going to fund that company through registered capital, maybe later on through contract terms, whatever it might be, through loans. Again, many options are available. You need to be aware of what those options are, whether you fit into the criteria of being able to utilize any of those options and understanding what's going to happen, right? The biggest thing I've learned with COVID is that you've got to have backup plans in place. In order to have backup plans in place, you have to have the knowledge level about what you can do. And money right now is critical to any company that is operating, whether in China or anywhere else around the world. So you've got to understand how much you need, basically, and how you're going to fund that organization. The last thing you want to do is not have money on the ground to pay employees, leaving you utterly embarrassed, causing turnover of employees because people are not going to wait around to get paid. Okay, nobody can afford to do that right now. Getting kicked out of an office space because you're not paying your rent, leading to you not having a registered office address, leading you to have bank accounts frozen. I say this out of not my own personal experience, thank God, but through clients' experiences. All right, we don't want that to happen. That's something we want to avoid, which is why, again, key consideration, you've got to understand all your options before you decide on the amount and to have those backup plans in case you need to fund the company. Action plan. Now, I've put in the first point because it's true. It is a fact. The Ministry of Commerce, as well as the Tax Bureau, like to see companies that have a minimum registered capital of 1 million renminbi. If you don't, they're not going to punish you. It's just that they like to see that, okay? If you don't have 1 million renminbi to invest, you're not forced to make that investment. You can put in, I've never gone below 50,000 renminbi. That's my disclaimer. So I've never had a client who has put registered capital lower than 50,000 renminbi. One man show. That's why he put in that amount. Okay. So I just want to mention that. Revenue being generated very quickly upon establishment. So he could afford to do that. And he did have a backup plan where he would increase it because he did have that kind of capital. But he figured that with the timeline of the establishment and the revenue being generated, he would be able to break even and maintain himself. All right. So I've never gone under 50,000 RMB. But what I want to see is a proper planning behind the company to know if they're going to rush out. And like I said, the Ministry of Commerce likes to see it. It's not a mandatory. No business plan is required to be seen by the government. No budget is required to be seen by the government. I just hope that you all have that in place though. Okay. And again, just because you have clients in the Chinese market does not mean your clients are going to pay you on time. Do not don't create a business plan or a budget that is reliant on the timing of being paid, because that will get you into trouble. So make sure that when you are creating this, you're making this calculation, you really have enough to build up your business. And know that you can always increase your registered capital. It is quite tough to decrease it though. Okay. When does the capital have to be injected? This is why I've put the term of validity. When you establish your company in China, you are, your capital is determined, the capital injection is determined by the amount of years that you're putting as your term of validation. So when you set up a company in China, it's not an open-ended company. You have to indicate a minimum term. The minimum term is 10 years. The maximum is 50 years. You can choose any number in between there. Okay. 10, 20, 25, 30, 50, as you wish. There is actually no pro and con to this whatsoever, because when you want to exit the market, you just have to go through a liquidation process. And in your company bylaws, the Articles of Association, there is a clause all about liquidating your company and what would be the reasons behind that. This is why don't follow the templates. Really analyze what could potentially make you exit the market, so that reason is in there, so that when you go through the liquidation process, the government cannot say to you, oh, we don't allow you to liquidate. Okay. So basically, if you choose 10 years, 6 months prior to the 10-year term, you go through a renewal process to be able to extend then the term of validity. And the capital is injected in that term of validity. So let's say you say 1 million renminbi. You've got 1 million renminbi. You've got 10 years to put in that 1 million renminbi. But obviously, if you need that 1 million RMB up front, that's all going to go in at once, or in a, within the first year, you might do several installment payments. Okay, if you guys have questions on that, put that in the Q&A, all right? Step 2 is around people, all right? Decision number 3 that you have to make is shareholder. Who is going to be the shareholder of your company? Like I said, I only work with foreign invested companies, so there's always a foreign investor that is involved as the acting shareholder. What is my advice around individual versus a company? Well, first of all, you should know you can register a company and you can be as an individual the shareholder, or you can use an overseas company as the shareholder. I don't know if many of you know that. I recommend not to invest as an individual in China. I feel that as an individual, there's a lot of risk that is going to be placed on your shoulders should anything go wrong. And I'm talking about really worst case scenarios. And number 2, if you're looking at it from a tax optimization perspective, I see no value, particularly if you're going to eventually sell your company or repatriate. to yourself, I do not see any value from a tax perspective at all. It is more beneficial to do that through a company. So through a company, that's acting as the intermediary between yourself as the beneficial owner and your entity in China. All right. So many ways of structuring a company in China, guys. I would prefer to keep this on a one-to-one basis for advisory, because everybody will have a different situation based on them. One question that I do get asked quite often, should I consider an offshore holding? So, historically, a lot of companies used Hong Kong as a intermediary entity for their China subsidiaries, keeping it as purely a holding structure. Now, according to the double taxation agreements between Hong Kong, China, between UK, China, US, China, Canada, China, whatever, there are a lot of DTAs now out there. The shareholding entity has to show commercial and economic substance, meaning it cannot be a pure holding company. As such, you have to create that substance in that shareholding structure in order to be able to benefit from the tax rates in the double taxation agreements. In addition to that, the tax bureaus in China, whenever you're trying to repatriate funds in whatever shape or form, they're going to be looking at that. They're also going to be looking at the place of the effective management of the Chinese company. So where are those people sitting, i.e. in the corporate management, and whether there's any indirect transfer of assets. For me, utilizing an offshore holding company will only cost you money to maintain that entity versus actually bringing you any benefit at all in the short term. Don't forget, you can always change your shareholdership. We're going through 2 applications right now. One with an individual, changing it to a structure he has developed overseas that is operational, again, to minimize his risk, his personal risk. And another one for legitimate reasons around selling the business. So think about these things. Talk to someone. Don't just set up a Hong Kong company. I absolutely hate it when someone sets a Hong Kong company and after 2 to 3 years starts yelling at me because my service fees, I'm still invoicing for service fees because, well, we have to maintain the entity, but they're not using that entity at all. So why should they be paying those fees? Well, then you should never have set up that entity from the beginning, okay? Whatever corporate service provider you're gonna work with, they're gonna charge you for the maintenance of your company, wherever that might be, whether it's Singapore, British Virgin Islands, Seychelles, Hong Kong, okay? And if you're not really utilizing it from the beginning, there's no point having it. You're gonna pay fees for nothing. That's my belief. And again, much easier to talk one-to-one on that. People always use Hong Kong as this, it's the gateway to China. Let's use Hong Kong. Again, use Hong Kong wisely. If Hong Kong makes sense for your business model and you're actually going to use it for transactions, then by all means, have Hong Kong, and Hong Kong acts as the parent company or shareholder to the Chinese entity. If you're only setting up Hong Kong as a pure holding structure, then just as a tip, it's cheaper to do that with the British Virgin Islands entity or the Seychelles entity than a Hong Kong company, okay? Think smartly about how you are structuring your business. And please, don't just take advice from me. I know I know Hong Kong and China regulations. I do not know the regulations in your home jurisdiction. So if you're setting up Hong Kong, BVI or whatever, and you're repatriating profit basically back from China via these entities, how that's going to impact you in your home jurisdiction, talk to an advisor there. You need to talk to advisors in several locations to make sure that the business model you're creating makes sense. Don't just talk to the folks in China. It makes no sense. I can only give you the advice of what I know. And I only know the China advice. I do not know in detail how things work in the UK, the US, Canada, Australia, and all of these various jurisdictions. Okay, so that's my disclaimer right there. Decision 4 is corporate management in China. You have these 2 options about how you're going to develop your corporate management structure, okay? And this will really depend on the size of your organization and the amount of people that are going to be responsible for the China business. If you're looking at the screen, on the left-hand side, you're going to see the structure with the board of directors. On the right-hand side, you're going to see the structure with the executive director. Board of directors requires a minimum of 3 people. Executive director is just 1 person. As such, on the left-hand side with the board of directors, you will need a minimum of 4 people. Could have more, but you need a minimum of 4 people to be appointed. On the right-hand side, you need a minimum of 2. So I'll explain what that means. The board of directors is 3 people in general. The chairman of the board will be the legal rep and the GM, and then you will have a separate person who's the supervisor. On the right-hand side, 1 person can be the executive director, legal rep, GM, and then you need 1 person to be the supervisor. The supervisor cannot be anybody appointed with the left-hand side. So the board of directors, legal rep, GM, or executive director, legal rep, GM, okay? There is a lot of fear out there with people taking on these roles because actually they don't know what the responsibilities are. They don't know, what will be the liability on them as individuals. And let me just put it like this, okay? Unless your business is doing actual criminal activity, you've got nothing to worry about. In order to avoid criminal activity, you've got to have corporate governance guidelines placed within your organization to make sure that no employee and nobody within the senior management is performing any form of criminal activity or any form of corporate activity that could be construed as illegal. So what does this mean? It means you don't have to have any fear being appointed in this. Just make sure you take the time to create corporate governance guidelines within your organization to maintain a level of transparency so that you know exactly what's going on within your organization. All right. Allocating power and mitigating risk. I don't want to say anything wrong about the Chinese because actually I love them. I love the people. I love living there. It's home for me. But I can understand with a lot of foreign investors because of media news, which is very negative towards the Chinese in many instances, there is a lack of trust. So for those of you that are new to the market, all I will say is the following. Delegating power always requires a degree of trust. As such, don't delegate power from day one, okay? You delegate power as you are acquainted with and know and spend time with and develop a relationship with the employees or the people that you are working with. So initially, you may want to separate the powers of authority amongst a variety of different people so that you build trust and you can see where you can place your trust and where the loyalty will come from, okay? There are certainly a lot of ways of mitigating risk. And again, this is something that should be discussed with your lawyer, with your corporate service provider, prior to establishing your business, okay? I can share, and again, I have a webinar on this, so if you guys want to look on the YouTube channel, you can, but I'm just going to go back to this structure. There are companies who have appointed Westerners and Chinese where it's just gone absolutely wrong. And there are ways of mitigating this risk to get rid of people legally and properly, but you've got to have this set up ahead of time, okay? So don't just choose random individuals and then forget about placing the corporate governance and then oopsie la, something happens and someone does something wrong against you. Then you have to pay a lot of money for the lawyers to fix it versus actually spending the time now to get things in place so that at the point that something goes wrong, you pick up the phone, you tell your lawyer, initiate. And then they will initiate the process to fix everything and it can be done quite quickly, okay? You are not on the ground, well, I assume, sorry. For those of you that are not on the ground in China, you will need help because right now with border controls and all of this, I want you to be able to set up your companies with a level of faith in whomever you're working with to do things in your best interest. So make sure that you've got I mean, I've got my lawyer on speed dial in case something happens, because my focus should not be on these types of activities. It should be on the growth of my business. And by implementing certain, protocols, I have the ability to then delegate that to somebody who is a professional in that area and can do it much better than I can and faster. Okay. So make sure you do that ahead of time. Company chops is a very good example of, who should be handling them, where should they be held, who should be holding them, what are they going to be used for, understanding what they are going to be used for, so that you can make the decision of who's going to hold them. Okay, so all of that should be discussed ahead of time. As an action plan, I've listed a couple of questions here about the China operations in terms of who or what is making the investment, who is the China company decision maker, who will be the chief financial officer, finance manager, who will be the bank signatory, or who will be approving payments, who will keep control of the company chops, who will keep control also of the licenses and certificates, who's the authorized signatory in the shareholder structure. Do you choose board of directors, executive director, and who will be appointed in the various roles? These are all decisions that need to be made just simply under the title of corporate management and shareholdership. Step 3 is on location. I'm going to speed through this because on Friday, I'm going to go in depth on this. But in terms of location, decision number 5 will be the company name for China. And you might be wondering why I've tied this into the location area. I have, because of the following. So basically, when you create your company name, you have to do it in Chinese because the English name is not registered. So my English name for my company is Woodburn. If I do a direct translation, is Woodburn Management Consulting, Shanghai Company Limited. I don't even use my Chinese name, so I can't even tell you what it is, which is quite embarrassing. But I actually really don't use it at all. So in my organization, we don't use our Chinese name for anything, which is why it was not important for me what the Chinese name was going to be. I just wanted to make sure that the third parties that I was collaborating with and the employees I was going to hire were not going to be embarrassed by working with a company with that Chinese name. So I did want it to be reflecting something positive. I mean, we all want our names to reflect something positive, right? Now, if you guys are looking to get a Chinese company name, what I would highly recommend is talk to media agencies, brand agencies. They offer this individual service of coming up with a Chinese name to reflect your business, reflect your products, reflect your services. And they will also do a check depending on where you are based. So i.e. which city you're going to register your company, whether that name is available, whether the trademark is available, and whether the domain is available. So it's an all-in-one encompassing service, which I think is fabulous for those that need help in coming up with a Chinese name for their company. Because this is, again, where people forget. The Chinese, registering a company in China, you have to have a Chinese name, but it has nothing to do with your trademark registration, and it has nothing to do with the domain registration. And potentially you need all these 3 to run your business. So when we were choosing the name of Woodburn, we checked, well, from an English name perspective in Hong Kong, we were checking that the English name is available. For trademark, we were checking that it was available in Hong Kong and in China. And in regards to domain, we also checked that it was available. Woodburn was not, Woodburn Global was, so we adapted. Okay, but that's the analysis you're gonna have to do with that Chinese name. You're gonna first of all analyze whether you need one, whether it makes sense to have one, whether you're going to use it from a marketing and branding perspective or not, how important it is to you for you to have a legitimate name, whether you need to register it as a trademark, and whether you are going to use that Chinese name for domain registration. Okay. The formatting is, I use this for Shanghai and other cities. It's a bit different. For example, in Guangzhou, you start off with Guangzhou company name, type of thing you're doing, company limited. So every city will have their own thing. I've done this as an example for Shanghai. So ABC would be Woodburn Management Consulting, Shanghai Company Limited. Okay, so this is why it's very important for 2 reasons, the company name, and why I've put it under city of formation. You have already figured out your business scope because that was decision 1. So you know the business type you're going to be establishing. So company name plus engineering services, management consulting, production of XYZ products, information consulting, I'm trying to come up with examples here. Yeah, you guys get the picture, right? If you're an engineering company, if you are an information consulting company, you are all going to have a different type of business type, and that goes in the name of the company. And then you have the city of formation. Shanghai is where we register our company. Where are you going to be registering your company? In which city? It will be put in the name, okay? Plus company limited. So this is why I've put this under location, because when you do your company name search, you're going to be doing it with the Ministry of Commerce in Shanghai to check availability of that name. You're not checking in all of China, just the city where you are establishing, okay? So questions to ask your management. How important is the Chinese name to you? Are you looking to have a Chinese name? Do you need help with getting a Chinese name? Again, media agencies, brand agencies are wonderful for providing that service. If you need tips on that, let me know. Happy to provide you with names so you can reach out to them. Analyze trademark versus domain versus Chinese company name. Do we need help based on the importance and image of the name? Okay, these are things you've got to ask yourselves, okay? The Chinese language is the only name that's registered. However, when you have your company shop, which I can show you straight away because that's in my desk, this looks like this. This is your company shop, like that. We only have our Chinese name on it, which I don't like, but I will eventually amend to add our English name. But in the company shop, you can put both your English and Chinese name in there, okay? The company name must be different than any other company registered in your same kind of business type. There are two ways that you can choose a company name: descriptive, or pick a name that has no meaning, or actually pick a name that does have meaning, but you know, has meaning towards the products and services that you're doing, okay? So you have that option available. Again, use native speakers in Chinese, or again, work with a branding company or public relations firm that can help you on that. And then when you've chosen your name, do the check whether of the availability, okay? And check if there are any conflicting names that already exist. And most importantly, again, I'm going to highlight this and emphasize this: company name, trademark, domain, all three. Analyze that, all right, for the availability. Decision 6. Now I am going to be doing on Friday an in-depth to decision 6, because for me, it's the one that nobody takes seriously and it gets very frustrating. So if you're interested in this one, please sign up for Friday, because I will really be going in depth on that one. But there are legal consequences for selecting your location in China. Registered office address is a must for any company registration, and by law, it must be your operational office as well, not a virtual office or a fake office or whatever you want to call that, okay? It must be your operational office. Virtual office addresses are illegal. I don't know if you are all aware of that or not. Bank accounts can be frozen. Random government inspections can happen. Again, I'll go into detail on that on Friday. A 1-year lease agreement must be signed. So any agreement shorter than that will be denied during the registration process. And this happens sometimes where I have clients who sign a lease because they're raring to go, but then they get a red light from the management to halt. They've got this active lease. Then 6 months later, they've got the green light again to move forward. You actually have to, at that point, re-sign a lease that's 12 months valid, okay? So don't sign a lease and pay for it unless you're really raring to go. Type of property is of utmost importance, and that will depend on your business scope. So if you have a manufacturing business scope, or even a trading business scope, you might need a warehouse or a factory. If you're trading, you might be commercial. Service will be commercial. If you're retail, you'll be in a retail shop. Every single property has a real estate bureau certificate, which designates what type of property it is. You cannot register a company in a residential building. Okay? And the key thing, one company can be registered in only one registered office address space, which gets into difficulty for the person that asked the question about converting from a rep office to a limited company, this is where problems arise, because your rep office is in one registered address. When you set up your LLC, it cannot be in the same address. Okay? And you need to be aware of that. Next slide. And this again, I get quite a lot. You are suddenly realizing that the location you have chosen is not a success for your business, and now you wish to change cities. You cannot just move your company from Beijing to Shanghai. That is 2 government jurisdictions. One is Beijing under the local Ministry of Commerce, and one is Shanghai under the local Ministry of Commerce in Shanghai. So ultimately, if you want to move from Beijing to Shanghai, you can either set up a branch entity in Shanghai or liquidate Beijing and set up new in Shanghai. You can't just relocate. Tax consequences for selecting your location in China. Each city in China is made up of districts. When you choose your office space, you are registering your company in that city, and you're registering your tax status within that district in that city. So for example, in Shanghai, again, personal opinion, I would not recommend, if you could avoid it, to not put your company in Pudong district or in Jing'an. And I have reasons around that, which I'll explain on Friday's session, okay? And that's just come with experience, okay? But you've got to understand your tax status will be in the district of the city that you, of the district that you have chosen your office in, okay? Remember, the tax incentives may be offered by state, local, or district governments. Be wary of those. I'm going to give on Friday some tips around that. If they are being offered, make sure they are valid. That's all I'm going to say today. Make sure those tax incentives are valid, okay? And will stick around for a long period of time. No point signing a tax incentive that's valid today, but in 2 years, when you're actually starting to make money, is gone, all right? Should you wish to change office space and move to a new district in the future, so let's say you are in Shanghai in Pudong district and now you want to move to Jing'an district, understand the tax consequences around that, okay? Again, something you should know up front before you establish your company. Because ultimately what I would say to you is choose a district where you can see yourself staying forever. Because we want to avoid moving from district to district. It can cause a halt in your business for about 3 months if not planned out properly. And then your action plans. So if you are a startup going into China, please make the calculation. Is it better to start off in a business center, or is it better to start off in an operational office where you are going to pay for renovation, decoration, and all of the assets that have to go into that office versus starting off straight away, you know, with a bang in a business center like WeWork, Executive Center, CEO Suite, Regis, whatever it might be. All right, so make that calculation. Step 4 is finance. Okay, decision number 7 is the bank. These are the steps during the incorporation process related to the opening of the bank, a bank account. Do your homework. Which bank do you choose? Please do not leave it up to your corporate service provider or lawyer to decide that. They should be giving you options. Hopefully they're giving you connections to people you can talk to at the bank to make your own decision. What I tell my clients is that my clients are like my children. I hope one day they will leave me and be independent and learn to build their business and grow their business on their own. If they're going to leave me, I hope they've made the right decision regarding the bank and didn't follow, you know, what I said. They should have made that decision on their own, because I won't be around forever, okay? Your lawyers won't be around forever. Your corporate service providers won't be around forever. At some point, you will be going out into the world, great big world or country of China, and I hope you will all be independent. So choose the bank by yourself, okay? Have those discussions on your own, okay? And yeah, I do have opinions around banks. And I do have preferences around banks. So If you guys have a question on that directly, I'm more than happy to give you my opinion. And certainly give you connections to people at banks. But that really should be up to you to decide. When you are in the process of starting the application, you should start having conversations with the banks yourself, because you should be learning how frustrating it is to work with a bank in China. Because then you'll have less anger towards your corporate service provider or your in-house accountant on how to deal with banks. You should learn just a little bit of it from a distance. Like anywhere else in the world, working with banks can be a disaster in China. And you need to understand what that is and what that looks like, okay? So the first conversation you're gonna have with the bank is, I'm interested in working with you. And I've actually created an agenda list for clients, so it gives them a bit of guideline on how to steer that conversation. But it's just to get an understanding of what type of service level you're going to be getting from different banks. But you should ask for the document list. You should understand the operations of each account, each bank, and how the accounts operate. And you should learn that from them. And obviously you can always get advice from corporate service providers, additional advice on that. But I really wish people would know more about that up front. Once the business license is issued, you've got to start that discussion, either your lawyer or your corporate service provider, with the bank for the bank account opening. In Shanghai, under COVID-19, banks require Zoom conference calls to meet the legal representative. So that's who you've appointed in the corporate structure, who shows their original passport. So, oh my God, I got everything on my table today. It's fabulous. I'm just going to show the cover. So you have a Zoom call like this. You say, this is my passport. You open up to the picture page and you say, yes, I am Christina Kohler-Kalucha, and I am looking to open a bank account today at your bank. I need to open up a capital account and I need to open up a renminbi account. And we are the 24th of March, and I hope that that application begins today. So either it's through a Zoom conference call or it is through a video that you record that is then sent off to the bank, okay? In places like Shenzhen, they do not accept Zoom calls or video calls. They expect you to go to the bank in person to give your original passport, which if you're willing to do a 14-day quarantine in Shenzhen for a 2-hour meeting with the bank, then by all means, please go ahead and do that if you are the legal rep. If not, we'll have to find a solution around that, okay? And since August 2020, the bank is required by the People's Bank of China to visit your registered office address to prove that you are not in a virtual office location. So you need to be aware of that, okay? Which is again why location is such a big part of all of these decisions. Like I said, every decision flows into the next decision, okay? The whole bank account opening process can take between 25 to 30 working days. For the full capital account and renminbi basic account to be opened, sometimes it can be longer than that. Next, that's just the bank account opening, guys. So that's why I've added this slide, because once your account is opened, we are outside of the incorporation phase and we're now into the operations phase of your company. And that's, I wanted to make a differentiation there. All of these steps, 1 to 5, was purely incorporating the account. Now comes the actual operations. So when your accounts are opened, you have to obviously set up the online banking, which might take, what did I write here? Of how many days? At least 10 working days. Sometimes a bit longer, because sometimes you need to actually download Internet Explorer, the old version, in order to be able to go on the online platforms. Then you also need to receive the key tokens, and you need to decide who's going to operate these key tokens, who's going to be what I call the cashier, and who's going to be the authorizer of the transactions. Capital is remitted from shareholder. I've put that in capital letters because people forget who their shareholder is and suddenly remit capital from a variety of different accounts. It will not be accepted unless it comes from the shareholder. And the name of the shareholder has to be the name that matches on your business license. So if you've made a mistake already there, you have to redo all the paperwork. In order to use the capital initially that's sitting in the capital account, you have to show proof of any upcoming payments to be made through the bank, such as office rent, salaries, any additional expenses. You need to provide the rental contract and invoice. You need to provide an employment contract, payroll breakdown, and for any other expenses that have to be administered, you will have to show evidentiary proof around that expense. And then it will go from the capital account, either direct out or into the RMB basic account to then be spent. This process for number 8 can last between 3 to 4 months, depending on the bank that you have chosen. Remember, the account opening process should not determine how you choose your banking partner. People always say, I'll work with the fastest bank who can open the account. Well, why would you do that? You want a long-term relationship with the bank, okay? This partnership will last for the full validity of your organization. Hopefully, that didn't happen to me. I actually got kicked out from my bank and had 30 days to find a new one. I don't wish that on anybody. I went from a foreign bank to a local bank at that time, which is why I have an extreme bias around certain banks, just from personal experience. So again, choose your banks wisely. Value-added tax status. This is decision number 8. So let me go back to historically what this means. When you are establishing your company, as I highlighted in terms of the people that have to be assigned, is the fact that in the corporate management, and I will do this as decision 9, you have to also add the finance manager. And at the same time, as you are going through the process to establish the company, one of the steps after the bank account opening is the tax registration. The first question that the tax bureau will ask is who's going to be the finance manager of the company, and the second question will be, are you going to become a general VAT taxpayer, or will you remain as a small-scale taxpayer? In order to make sure that the incorporation is flowing very smoothly, you need to make these decisions up front, okay? Basically, I mean, there's a lot of content on this slide, but what I want to basically say with this is that if you become a general VAT taxpayer, it's an application process, takes 2 to 3 days to get the approval. And it means that you can reclaim and offset VAT on purchases, okay, against the sale of goods and services. If you are a small scale taxpayer, it means that you cannot offset any VAT from purchases, okay? In general, you will get upgraded to the general VAT taxpayer as your revenue increases over time, and as you have stable revenue over a consecutive period of time, okay? Small scale taxpayers pay VAT quarterly, general VAT taxpayers pay VAT monthly, okay? You should do an analysis of this, and that's why the budget becomes critical, whether it makes sense for you to remain as a small scale taxpayer to save on taxes versus applying straight away for a general VAT taxpayer status. I want to get to the Q&A because I've seen questions popping in. If you guys have specific questions about VAT, type that in. I can also direct you to a webinar I've done specifically on VAT, if that might help you. Decision 9 is about the appointment of the finance manager, which is a person that is going to be appointed under your company name. The biggest question around this, especially as you are a startup in China, is whether you're going to hire somebody in-house who's going to take on that role that you might not have found yet. So who would you appoint then, or outsource that function? Okay. There's no right or wrong to this. I mean, I've put here pros and cons related around the cost of hiring someone in-house against the cost of outsourcing. I think you should weigh that out. Looking at the talent, you know, if your budget is minimal, then you're not going to find a very experienced finance manager or accountant versus outsourcing that to a provider who should have that caliber of talent. Recruitment, do you really want to go through the recruitment process of hiring an admin person from the beginning, or is your focus more on recruiting on actual people that are going to develop the business, like salespeople, BD people, etc.? Where do you want your focus to be initially? And what I mean by that is your focus going to be on setting up the back-end administrative functions and spending time on that in-house, or are you going to outsource that to experts who can help build that foundation for you? Specialization. So, you know, if you are in production and which is, you know, complex transactions in some instances, because you're buying raw materials, using those raw materials, you might be importing raw materials, you might be selling domestic, you might be exporting the finished products. It becomes very complicated when you're looking at the whole VAT aspect, customs aspect, inventory, etc. That, you know, are you going to be able to fund that initially, or is it better to outsource that? And then obviously language and culture, which is something, you know, people sometimes underestimate and don't spend the time on. You know, a finance person should be somebody who speaks 80% fluency at a minimum, so that they can communicate with you and your CFO back home properly, and that there are zero language restrictions. I have met too many companies that have hired finance people, finance managers who do not speak a word of English, and they are reliant on the GM, who should not be spending his time on translation, translating those things, who is not a finance expert, maybe doesn't know all the terms around finance. And when talking to the CFO abroad, there's tremendous amounts of misunderstanding and miscommunication. So be wary of the language and culture aspect. I would probably say number 6 is one of the biggest failings that I see in companies when they're trying to create the foundation of their business. So yeah, I've gone through, you know, the advantages and disadvantages around outsourcing or keeping somebody inside. I mean, disadvantages of outsourcing will always be the following, right? At some point, and that's why I say I'm like a parent trying to release my kids into the wild. I want my clients to become independent, because at some point my fees will be equivalent to a finance manager who speaks fluent English. It doesn't make sense to keep me, right? Working with outsourced providers, the biggest dilemma there is feedback. You're not going to get immediate feedback. Outsourced providers have hundreds of clients that they're working on at any one point in time. So feedback will be delayed versus having someone in-house where you can get feedback at a moment's notice, right? So that's, you have to understand, you have to make that evaluation of what you need in terms of your operation. So that is actually the China incorporation blueprint, something I've created in terms of really the 9 key considerations surrounding an incorporation in China. You know, you're looking at the structure, you're looking at the people you're going to appoint, the location, and the finance aspect around that company. And those decisions should be made upfront. I would love to know what your biggest takeaway was from today. If you felt that something was missing, please type that to me. I'm always trying to improve my presentations. And let me know if this was a useful presentation or not, all right? We are going to go ahead and start the questions. And just before that, 7 ways you can work with me. I don't usually try to sell myself, but I'm going to try and sell myself a little bit here. Is we do incorporation advisory. We can do that independently from the incorporation in China. We do competitor business scope benchmarkings. We also appoint, we can act as supervisors for your companies. We can appoint finance managers. There will be certain criteria around those 2 things. We offer tax advisory, and then obviously the outsourcing solutions for accounting, tax, and payroll and compliance. If you guys want to book a strategy session with me, I've already input all of my details into the chat box. So if you want to scroll all the way to the top, my details will be there, and you can certainly reach out to me for a discussion. Happy to speak with you. So just to get to the Q&A, let me just check the time. Oh my God, we've already hit 90 minutes. Apologies, everybody. All right, so Charles was asking, can English versions of the documents take precedence? No, they cannot. The English versions are purely for your benefit. It will always say in the Articles of Association, where, again, I recommend that it's a bilingual Articles of Association. It will always say at the end that the Chinese version prevails. Hope that helps, Charles. David was asking, hold on. So David is the one that has an existing rep office and is looking to upgrade. So David, in your regards, to upgrade from a rep office to a limited liability company, what does that mean? basically, a rep office is its own entity, an LLC is its own entity. The dilemma around this is whether you want to keep the same registered office address or not. If you do, you will have to rent another space, move the rep office into that space in order to move the LLC into that space, and then you can register the LLC at that location. It is not convenient at all. But that's the only way in order to keep the rep office running with employees and assets and whatnot. Eventually, once the LLC is set up, the employees are transferred over with new employment contracts, where I would recommend stating the length of relationship with them as a benefit to them. And then also transferring furniture and whatever else you might be having in terms of assets. Not a very simple procedure, especially if you are looking to stay in the location that you're in. If you've got questions around that, David, please do let me know. Lording says, in which regions do you have strong relationships with local government? My question is, do you need local government relationships? Is it a necessity to have local relationships? What do you, I just got into a debate last week actually with somebody about government relations. I'm in a business where I do talk to the government. I talk to tax officers, tax bureaus. I talk to the Ministry of Commerce to get information. Do I use the government for my own business? No. Are you in an industry that is restricted or prohibited, in which case you will need to have a government partnership, most probably. Otherwise, why would you need a relationship with the government? You will need to obviously work with government bureaus like your tax bureau. If you're expatriating a foreigner, you'll have to get his visa. And so of course you're in touch with the government. But these are administrative functions. If a Chinese is moving to Germany, you will also have to be in touch with the government to do bureaucratic application procedures. But in what way do you need the government for your business if you are not in a restricted or prohibited sector? Okay, and don't look at the connections I have. What connections do you have, if any? And if you don't, then my suggestion actually to formulate relationships is with German-China associations. So I say German-China because Lording is based in Germany, but it could be UK-China associations. They have the current and most up-to-date connections. Because don't forget, there's also turnover amongst government staff. Okay, so I'm a bit iffy about the whole, oh, I must have government relations when I go to China. Well, no, you don't, unless you are in a restricted, prohibited area where you need to have a contact in order to get your business up and running. Me, I don't need the government to run my business. I don't need them. I run my business as any business, whether I'm based in Hong Kong or China. It's exactly the same. I have bureaucratic relationships because I need to get my visas renewed and whatnot, as I would if I were to move to Thailand, okay? Visa applications are something that is so straightforward. Incorporations of a company, if you follow the blueprint, are so straightforward, okay? So where would you need a government relationship? That's something you have to analyze in that regard. Julia was asking, can the legal rep and or general manager also be one of the board of directors? Yes, Julia, generally the chairman of the board will be the legal rep and or general manager. But it does not have to be. You can also have the board of directors and you can have a separate person acting as the legal rep and a separate person acting as a GM if you wished. It does not have to be the same people. Daniel is saying, could a competitor or copycat register the same company name in a different location? Yes. So, if I'm based in Shanghai and I've got my Chinese name, somebody could register that name in Shenzhen or in Chongqing or in Chengdu if it's available. But their full name would be different than mine, right? And I'm obviously branding myself differently. The key will come around not really the Chinese company name, but your trademark, Daniel, right? How are you branding yourself? And is that branding? Because when you register your trademark, that's for all of China. So again, make that differentiation. Can you open a business in China from overseas? Yes, you can. If you open up in a place like Shanghai, where you can do Zoom video calls and or make videos of yourself, then you can absolutely, you don't have to travel to China at all. You'll just be sending a lot of documents back and forth. I hope I answered your question, Chuka. Daryl, HSBC sounds like they might be a useful bank for use in China. Wrong or right? Well, Daryl, HSBC is the one that kicked me out. So for me, I'm very biased against them. I'm probably not the right person to talk to about HSBC. Also, if you talk to HSBC, they are extremely selective about the companies that they will collaborate with. And you have to understand what their criteria are for you to become a client of theirs. It's not you choosing them, it's them choosing you. So I'm very negative towards HSBC. And if you have more questions on that, you can definitely reach out to me. I'd prefer to discuss it on a one-to-one basis than over a Zoom call that would be public everywhere. Charles was asking, can you protect trademarks without opening a Chinese company? Of course you can. Yeah. So for me, when registering trademarks, you could do that tomorrow. Trademarks are something you should be thinking about even before you start doing business in China. And it is a fantastic way when you do have an entity in China to be able to repatriate funds, as long as that trademark is owned by the overseas entity. And I'm happy to give you more information on that, Charles, if you wish. But yes, absolutely. Trademarks and domain registrations can be done today or tomorrow, as you would like. They are not reliant on you establishing a Chinese company. And this is where sometimes the dilemma arises, where you've registered a Chinese name as a trademark in China, and then you find out that that Chinese name is not available for your company registration. So it could very well be that you operate in China with a company name that's Chinese, that's something very different from the brand that you've created. Can happen. Guys, that was the last question that came in from Charles. If you guys have any other questions, I will hang around, but that is the last one that popped in. And I hope I was able to answer everybody's question on today's listing. Apologies for running over, guys. And again, just to end, because Leanne just reminded me, there are 4 more sessions this week. Oh, so tomorrow we're going to be talking about foreign investment law and how it might impact you as a newbie to China. On Wednesday, we're going to be talking about the JV infection. I love that title. And how to avoid it, i.e. can you avoid not setting up a JV? And then on Thursday, we're going to be talking about how to get the most out of your China market entry with or without having an entity. And then on Friday, we're looking in depth at the registered office address, because really for me, that's the biggest mistake that people make in terms of more money that they have to spend later on. All right. So if you haven't signed up for those, go to woodburnglobal.com/events. You can definitely register there. Guys, I hope this was really useful for you. Again, any questions, please ask. I am just going to type in again, if you guys want to set up a meeting with me, I'm just going to add my details once again here, or if you want to connect with me as you wish. I'm going to send it to everybody. There you go. You've got all my details once again. All right. Don't hesitate to reach out, have a conversation, a one-to-one chat. Again, no strings attached. It's just a way to connect and see if you've got any questions about setting up in China. Thank you all for joining me. I'm going to go ahead and stop the share, stop the recording, sorry. And I will stay on if you guys have got any more questions. All right. Chuka, I'm not going to reveal my service fee on a live video. If you want my details, I'm happy to give you a proposal. Just send me an email and I will forward that out to you. All right, apologies, but I won't reveal fees on live Zooms that will go in the public domain. All right, so my emails are listed up in that category. So just message me, and I'll send that over. All right, thanks everyone. Take care and bye.